Hello and welcome to week 2 of your Introduction to Literacy class. Hopefully you enjoyed the first week and getting to know each other, not only through the class introductions, but also through the first discussion board posting that you did about some of your earliest memories. So I enjoyed reading all of them. This is the way that I get to stay involved with you as the student since I don't have you in a face-to-face class. So I think I responded to everyone to welcome you to the class. And if I did not respond to your other discussion board, please know I read absolutely everything, post, responses, everything. But sometimes I'm not able to personally respond to each one. But I did want you to know that your effort is not in vain. I really do read everything. And so I enjoyed getting to know each of you through your discussion board posting. So as we move on to week 2, what you're going to find is chapter 2 is all about the different perspectives on how children develop reading and writing, which correlates with the discussion board posting I asked you to respond to this week about how you remember learning to read and write and trying to correlate it with the particular perspective that is mentioned in the chapter. So if you notice, there's 4 different perspectives in chapter 2, and each one of them is going to be broken down into the same sections: how children develop reading and writing, the role of the classroom teacher, as well as the instructional approach that best goes with that particular perspective. What I will tell you over all of my years of research in reading and writing, which that is my passion, is talking about reading and writing with young children. I wrote my dissertation on how important it is to get young children involved in creative writing and how it's going to help them be motivated in the future. But what I can tell you about the different perspectives is that each one of them comes along because somebody didn't agree with what someone else had already said. So, for instance, when you look at the first perspective, what you're going to find when you look at the second one is that that perspective was developed because someone did not 100% agree with what the first perspective said. So they take bits and pieces of what they agree with and then they change what they don't. And so over the course of time, that's why we have so many theories about how children learn, especially with reading and writing. Reading and writing are 2 of those topics that no one can pinpoint exactly how every single child is going to develop. And as we know, as parents, as teachers, as daycare workers, as preschool teachers, no 2 children are going to develop exactly the same. So it's important for you as you read through this chapter to really take note of the different perspectives and the different instructional approaches so that you can begin to develop what you believe about how children read and write. If you notice, this week I went ahead and gave you access to your philosophy paper, which is going to be your final exam. And the reason I did that was because this is really kind of the first chapter where you are going to start pulling some factual information that you're going to want to put in your philosophy paper. You may not 100% agree with any of these perspectives, but you may agree with bits and pieces of them. And that's okay. It's okay to have your own perspective of how you believe children need to learn to read and write, what you believe the teacher's approach should be, how the classroom should be arranged, the materials that children should have access to. But this really is where you're going to start getting some of that nitty-gritty information. So I wanted you to have your philosophy paper in advance so that as you go through this chapter and all of the remaining chapters, you can go ahead and start kind of filling in the pieces of what you're going to want to put in your philosophy paper. It's so much easier to do it as you go as opposed to trying to do it as you get to the very end and then you're trying to remember what you really did agree with. So hopefully that's going to be helpful for you to have that in advance. You can see the requirements for it. You can see the rubric for it. And so this way you can go ahead and start keeping notes as you go. I would definitely recommend jotting down page numbers that has information that you really think you're going to want to use, quotes that you may want to include in your philosophy paper, because I am going to want to see that you're pulling information from the textbook in order to frame your argument. So that really is chapter 2. It's not a very lengthy chapter, but it's a very important chapter. And what I appreciate about the way this book is actually set up in this chapter in particular is that it follows a very predictable pattern. So when they discuss the first perspective, you see all of the different subheadings ending with the instructional approach. When you get to the second perspective, it's set up exactly the same. So it makes it a lot easier to compare when you're using the same wording through each of the different perspectives. So that really is chapter 2 in a nutshell. Really, the last perspective, the transactional perspective, is the one that we kind of are in right now. But as you know, things are always changing. New research is coming out all the time, but at least it gives us a really good place to start. So the PowerPoint for chapter 2 is on Blackboard for you, as well as the philosophy paper. This week, you also notice that you have your first assignment that's going to be due before the end of the semester, which is your annotated bibliography. Now, really all an annotated bibliography is that it is a list of books where you have written down the title, the author, the illustrator. You're giving a short summary for it. And for this one, what I'd like for you to do is also to decide how you could possibly use these books with infants and toddlers. Next week's chapter is going to be about oral language development, which really is going to be the introduction to the infants and toddlers, which is why your annotated bibliography is not due this week. It's due at the end of next week. So when you go onto Blackboard, you will see that I created a detailed PowerPoint for you that goes through each part of the annotated bibliography. Please don't make it harder than it needs to be. What you're going to find about me is that I really believe that every assignment that you do should be practical. I don't give you any assignments that I feel like I just woke up and gave it to you because I was in a bad mood. What I really try and do is help you as you're going along. So the purpose of the annotated bibliography is to give you kind of the beginning of a resource file. If you've already had to research 10 children's books and you have already decided how they could be used, this one for infants and toddlers, but you know you can adjust it if you're working with older children. But if you already kind of have that in your back pocket, it makes it a lot easier when you get into the classroom. So I'm hoping within the next few days or so just to put a sample entry up on Blackboard for you so that you can see how it should be done. But really, each entry is probably going to be no more than half a page. So please don't feel like you need to make this harder than it needs to be. It really is just an easy introduction into children's books and how they can be used. The last thing for this week is a discussion board, and that will count as your attendance and participation. And please remember that the requirements for discussion boards from here forward are that you need to respond to the question yourself and then respond to at least 2 of your classmates. For last week, as long as you actually participated in the discussion boards, you got full credit. But from here going forward, please try and make sure that not only you post, but that you respond to at least 2 of your classmates as well. The discussion boards for each week are going to close at midnight on Monday, which is the end of the grace day. So just make sure that you have everything done by then. I think that's it for week 2. Enjoy reading about the different things that people believe about how children learn to read and write. I'm sure sometimes you're going to laugh out loud because it is so ludicrous the way that sometimes people have thought children actually learn, especially now that we're in the digital age. So enjoy reading the chapter. I look forward to reading your discussion board postings about your experiences with reading and writing, and I will see you next week.